In this episode of Chapman's Notes, we're going to take a look at the final principle for Jack Canfield's success principles, how to get from where you are to where you want to be. We're looking at principle number 32, which will make it number 10 of the 10 we're going to cover. The reason I chose this one as the final one to cover is because I notice it influences a lot of individuals' lives. Whether I'm doing counseling or working with students or supervisees or people that I coach, this seems to be consistent. The internal dialogue seems to contaminate people's ability to be optimal performers in a lot of different ways. Where does this critic come from? Well, it's a good question. Let's think about it. Most of the time it's coming from the outside and we internalize it. So it might be coming from an overbearing parent, somebody who is very judgy in terms of the society that you live in, or messages that you're seeing in the movies, on social media. It's coming from the outside, some critical critique that you're internalizing and making it your own voice. So the voice that you used to hear from your teacher that was kind of punitive has now become this voice that you say to yourself. And what happens is it is always around, it's always judging, it's always evaluating, no matter what you do, how you are in your relationships, how you are at school, how you drive, what kind of clothes you decided to wear, what does your hair look like, your weight, the salads you decided to eat or not to eat. This critic is live and well and is like everywhere you go, it has something to say. Problem is, these things that it has to say are usually not constructive. And research suggests that we're saying a ridiculous amount of words to ourselves every day, somewhere, between 1,000 and 3,000 every few minutes, or 60,000 in a day. And a majority of these words are negative or critical. So this critical guide that we have is working hard. He never takes a day off. And our thoughts are really like, William James described our thoughts like a stream of consciousness. So it's like a sentence that never stops. That's pretty much how our thoughts go. And if these thoughts are mainly negative, then they're mainly destructive and going against our goal or whatever it is we want to accomplish. What we want to do is be more conscious of this critic and realize how to shift the critic into a guide. Here's some things that you can do. First thing you want to do is be aware. You want to be aware of your thoughts, but also how you feel, because your feelings are an indicator of thoughts. So whenever you feel sad, depressed, angry, don't assume just because you feel it that feeling is accurate. This is not easy to do depending on how emotive you are. But when you feel an emotion, take some time to stop and ask yourself, is this feeling that I feel accurate right now? And what is it based on? Once you figure out the thoughts that it's based on, you dig deeper to see, that's how you're going to know if it's accurate or not. Well, I am upset about this because this person did that. Was that really their intention? How do I know for sure that was their intention? Is it useful for me to believe that was their intention? And that will shift your emotion, how you relate to that person, and how effective you are in general. So put it to the test. Become an attorney. Like Madlock, you're going to test it. That's a lawyer my grandma used to like, so that's who comes to mind. But you're going to become an attorney with your thoughts. You're going to be aware of your feelings and put them all to the test and see if there's evidence there. If there's no evidence, then that should help you dispute the particular emotion that you're having. In addition to being aware of your thoughts and feelings, be aware of what's going on in your body. We're holistic beings, right? So you can think about emotions. If you're able to identify them, you might not be able to identify them. You might just get tension or stomach pains or some other feeling. When you're feeling something like that, you may want to think about what were some things that you were just thinking about before that, because stress may have induced those feelings that you're having. Drown out the noise. So this doesn't mean that you have to go into the room and be like, this kind of meditation, but it does mean that you want to take some time to silence all of the other things so that you can be in touch with your genuine self, because we're trying to tap into your inner guide, not your inner critic. So your inner self, you're gonna have to give room for it to come out so that you can hear it. Probably it's a still small voice that gets crowded out by everything in the outside, and then your inner critic, so your inner guide can't be alive. In order for you to be able to hear your inner guide, you're gonna have to make enough space for you to hear those instincts and those intuitions become reality. So set aside some time daily and get used to having some routine where you can hear yourself, hear your inner thoughts, and then you'll realize if they are mainly polluted by your critic, and you can figure out a way to evaluate all those thoughts. But eventually, your inner guide is going to be there. He just hasn't been able to come out since you were 2. And you got to give him some space to come back out and be alive again. Developing your inner critic is not only going to require you to give it some space to come out, but also you're going to have to, you've done all this work of sabotaging yourself in some way with the critic. You're going to have to build yourself up too. So affirmations would be useful for that. And when you hear affirmations, I'm not sure what your response to it is. Affirmations are words about positive traits or characteristics about yourself that you recognize and then tell yourself. This is not just to get yourself gassed up. That's not the purpose of it. But there are some things that you've been capable of doing that you haven't been recognizing because they've been drowned out by the critic. So take some time to recognize those characteristics, those abilities that you have. Write those down. And then say those to yourself regularly so that you can program your critic. So when you need to, for example, your critic tells you, oh, we're not going to be able to do this, whatever it is. You're not going to be able to get this job. Your inner critic, your inner guide can then be tapped into when all the other instances where you did have the job, you went through the interview, you were successful. If you have those running through your mind, or affirmations that may not even have to do with the job. I am an overcomer. If you have history of overcoming things in the past, this is just another situation that you can overcome. But the problem is that is clouded out by your critic, because your critic is so strong that your inner guide, the voice cannot be heard. So you have to raise that voice. You have to intentionally feed it so it can get louder, so you can hear it among all of the contamination that exists with the critic. We spoke about a few things that you can do to help you bring out the inner guide and tame the inner critic. First thing you can do is be mindful or aware. What do you want to be aware of? Be aware of what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and then your body sensations. So when I say your body, you want to be aware of that because remember, you might not be as in touch with your feelings, and what you repress or suppress will come out in some way. So you might have stomach pains, you might have headaches, you might have back pain, and those are indicators sometimes of something else going on. So when you have those physical sensations, ask yourself, what were the thoughts that I was thinking, or what was going on with me mentally that might have contributed to that? Same thing with your feelings, because feelings are usually an indicator of thoughts. And when you're looking at your thoughts, you're putting those thoughts to the test of logic. Is this a rational thought? Does it make sense? Where is the evidence? And if you have a hard time figuring out if it does have evidence or doesn't have evidence, then you just ask yourself the question, is it useful? If this thought is not useful, consider getting rid of the thought. We've come to the conclusion of this episode of Chapman's Notes, and we are finished talking about the success principles, how to get from where you are to where you want to be by Jack Canfield. We only went over 10 of the principles, 10 that I thought would be most useful. If you are interested in reading the other 89, go ahead and get the book. I highly recommend it. You can get an audio version of it, or you can go ahead and get the printed version. Whichever one works better for you. I want to give you these other resources that I think will be helpful if you're trying to work through this inner critic and self-esteem has been an issue, or your self-concept. These books, Self-Esteem by Matthew McKay, he's a psychologist that works on self-esteem, and he works from a cognitive behavioral therapy frame of reference, which deals with this idea of distortions in thoughts and how to dispute those thoughts. So he has a lot of good guides in here. Even if you're not a big reader, you can use just the resources for combating thoughts, and that would be helpful. So it would be helpful just to get it for that particular reason. And then another one, which is more like a workbook, is this book by David Barnes. It works through distorted thoughts, also gives you a number of activities that you can do that will help you purposely combat that inner critic. Now that's an old book. There might be newer versions, but that book is useful and probably very affordable on Amazon, I would guess. In the next couple weeks, we'll be coming up with a new episode of Chapman's Notes with a new book. So be on the lookout. We're going to get into it, give you some skills to help you be a peak performer.